Our castaway today is Gwen Parrott. Born Gwenthin Batt in the then city and county of Bristol in 1929, she's the eldest of 5 siblings. Despite having held her own wake on her 80th birthday nearly 6 years ago, she's still here. Welcome to Desert Island Discs, Gwen. As I've said, you were born in Bristol in 1929. What are your earliest memories?
My earliest memories are sitting in my pram. I can remember that. And we lived with a great aunt and uncle. They had an Alsatian dog called Kaiser. And Kaiser used to sit beside my pram. And also, I just remember the touch of Kaiser's fur so much. And the other thing I remember is that we were always put to sit in the window late afternoon to wait for Dad to come home from work. My brother and I.
So you say about your dad. What did your dad do?
He was a wood machinist. A saw doctor. He sharpened saws for the firm he worked for. Made fittings for banks and shops and ships and things. So whatever wood was needed had to have a different type of saw. So he sharpened those saws.
Would you say it was a happy family life?
Yes.
And when did you move from there?
It would have been in about 1933-4.
And any of your siblings born at that time?
Yes.
You mentioned Den.
Yeah, and Barbara, my sister Barbara. Valerie was born when we moved house.
And was that to Robertson Road?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and what's your first track?
My first track is the finale from Faust. My dad was always ready to talk about sport and opera. They were his 2 main passions. And he would tell us the stories of the operas. And I remember him telling me about Faust, how Marguerite climbed the stairs to heaven and Faust had to be left below because he had sold his soul to the devil. And it's that particular track that I would like.
Alerte! Alerte! Vous êtes perdus! Si vous tardez encore, je ne m'en mêle plus!
Mon Dieu, protégez-moi! Protégez-vous encore!
Peut-être il en est temps encore!
Je radieux pour des moments passants et des cieux. Dieu juste, à toi je m'abandonne. Dieu beau, je suis
final scene of Charles Gounod's Faust, with Morelli Freni as Marguerite, Nikolai Gedda as Faust, and Roger Soyer as Mephistopheles, Charles Maracas conducting. Now, Mum, being it was in the early 30s, I suppose wartime was approaching.
Well, yes, I mean, starting school, primary, was perfectly normal. And I still remember all my teachers' names, actually. But then when I came into junior school was when the war broke out and the blitzes started. I know at school we had, the playground was dug up and a shelter was dug in tunnels under the playground. And sort of every time sirens went out, we had to go into the shelters. I remember this one particular day when it was a daylight raid and machine guns and things going on. And we were in the shelter, and at the corner of the shelter where I was always allowed to sit was this manhole cover. They propped open for me, but this particular day it had to be closed and I was claustrophobic. The Blitz was not a good time, but as children we didn't really realise the significance of it, because as soon as the Blitzes were over we used to go out collecting shrapnel before we went to school the next day, which sounds ridiculous. My brother and two sisters used to go to the Anderson shelter every night.
This would be Barbara and Valerie.
Yes, Dennis, Barbara and Valerie. We would go to the Anderson shelter where my dad had built bunks for us to be able to go down there to sleep to start with and not wait for sirens, because Dennis would invariably refuse to get up when the sirens went if he was asleep. And then it was decided that we should be evacuated. I don't know why, but I felt really quite excited about this. I thought it was wonderful to be going away from home until it became nearer the day and I wasn't so sure. I was 11, Dennis was 9, Barbara was 7, and Valerie was just 6. She'd been 6 in the February and we went in April. We travelled by train, took us most of the time to get to St Austell.
When you say you went in April, what year would that be?
1941. And we stopped at St Austell where we had medical examinations and there were ladies there with big teapots and we had drinks and Cornish splits and then we were taken on to our destination, which happened to be Indian Queens. Valerie and I were going to be billeted together, and Dennis and Barbara. So as Valerie was so young, they decided that we would go to the billet first of all, which we did. It was a strange sort of feeling, a great homesickness, because Auntie was an older lady and she'd never had children and she didn't really understand us at all. We stayed there for 6 weeks and then I, this 11-year-old, went to the billeting officer and asked for another billet, which amazes me now when I think of it. How did I do that? But my mother had put me in charge of the family. I had to look after them, so I was basically doing what I was told. My parents would visit anytime they could. It was difficult for Dad, purely because he was working war work and they didn't have time off, as it were. But my mother came every 6 weeks or so, and that was always lovely, but I just always wanted to go home to her, with her. We had good times when we were evacuated. There were lots of good times. There were lots of little individual things that I could say, but I would be here for the next 2 hours.
Your next track is Falling in Love is Wonderful.
Yes. This just makes me smile. Because when I think Brian and I were, my husband, were just engaged. And it was November time, and we went to London and went to see Annie Get Your Gun. And then coming back on the coach, of course it was very dark and there were these dimmer lights on in the coach. And Brian and I were sat in the front seat, and he started singing Falling in Love is Wonderful, and I was terribly embarrassed, but so pleased that it was dark.
Annie, have you ever loved anybody?
Somebody who loved me back?
Yeah.
Then I ain't. But I heard tell about it. They say that falling in love is wonderful. It's wonderful. So they say. And with a moon up above, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So they tell me. I can't recall who said it. I know I never read it. I only know they tell me that love is grand, and the thing that's known as romance is wonderful, wonderful in every way. So they say.
Rumors fly and they often leave a doubt, but you've come to the right place to find out. Everything that you've heard is really so. I've been there once or twice, and I should know. You'll find that falling in love is wonderful. It's wonderful, as they say. And with a moon up above, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, as they tell you. You leave your house some morning, and without any warning, you're stopping people shouting that love is grand. And to hold a man in your arms is wonderful.
That was Falling in Love is Wonderful, sung by Ethel Merman and Ray Middleton. from Irving Berlin's musical Annie Get Your Gun. So when did you return from your evacuation?
Well, I returned in 1943, towards the end of 43, because my parents really felt that as we left school in those days at the age of 14, I really ought to get home and get some schooling. So I came on my own, and my brother and sisters were left in Cornwall. They stayed in Cornwall. Then my sister Jennifer was born in April 1944. So then I had this sort of new baby to be thinking about. I left school in July 1944 and went on to comp school as I became a comptometer operator for 3 months, and then I started work. I worked for a branch of the Imperial Tobacco Company. It was the printing branch. They printed all the cigarette packets, the cigarette cards, advertising and everything. I thoroughly enjoyed working there. I worked in the office there, and that's when I first met Brian. He worked in the kitchen. He was chef, under chef. And we would have to go through, not the kitchen, but could see into the kitchen as we went through into the restaurant. And so he always winked at me, which is the sort of thing that Brian would do. Before then, when he'd worked in another part of the factory, I knew him just as a name on a payroll, because I used to do the payrolls every week, and also there was sort of really something rather amusing. It used to get £1 a year if you kept good time. It was called the good time money. And every time you were late, you had threepence stopped out of that pound. And I always noted that Brian never got good time money. He was always obviously late. But it was my meeting with him and then being told that it was not my first meeting with him, because we had met when we were in our prams.
So that brings us to your next track, Unforgettable. What are your reasons for choosing this track?
This is about my mother, because she is unforgettable.
Unforgettable, that's what you are. Unforgettable, though near or far. Like a song of love that clings to me, how the thought of you does things to me. Never before has someone been more unforgettable in every way. And forevermore, that's how you'll stay. That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks that I am unforgettable too. Unforgettable in every way, and forevermore, that's how you'll stay. That's why, darling, it's incredible that someone so unforgettable thinks that I am unforgettable too.
Unforgettable by Nat King Cole, music and lyrics by Irving Gordon. Now you say that was about your mum, your mother, my grandmother.
Yes. She was an amazing lady. She was a special lady. She was always positive. I have a lifetime of memories of her. I think of her every day. She was a very wise lady, but had a great sense of humour. And we had many times when we just had the giggles. She would start the giggles and then have the whole family, with the exception of my dad, giggling. He could never understand why this was. And yet, when he was a young man, my mother used to call him Jimmy Giggly. Isn't that strange? Yes, she was such a hard-working lady. And family was her number one consideration.
So there was this special lady pushing you in a pram, meeting up with your future husband when he was about 3 or 4 years old or something. So eventually you got married.
Yes, we did. And it was just sort of about 3 years after we met. And sort of being part of another family as well. And yet, because the two mothers, my mother-in-law and my mother, knew each other in the past, it wasn't like a strange family. It was just one big family. I was lucky.
And this also brings us on to your next song, which is This Is My Lovely Day. So that was your wedding day, was it?
Yes. We were married at St. Simon's Church, which was the church that the whole Parrott family had been brought up in, so it was their church. And it was a lovely day.
And you had mentioned sometime in the past to me about that you were cleaning the toilet on the day of your wedding.
Yes. That's why I wanted This Is My Lovely Day. Because my mother was at the shop, and so there were chores to do at home. And I was doing this, cleaning the outside toilet, and I was scrubbing the floor, and I was singing because I always sang a lot. I was singing This Is My Lovely Day, whilst my bridesmaids were upstairs in the bedroom getting themselves titty-bated up for my wedding. I just always think it's amusing, but it was a lovely day.
This is my lovely day. This is the day I shall remember, the day I'm dying. They can't take this away. It will be always mine, the fun and the wine, the sailors crying. All happiness must pay, and who can tell if fate means well, for the sky is lying. But look at me and say, you will remember too, that this was our lovely day.
This is our lovely day. This is the day I shall remember, the day I am dying. They can take this away. It will be always mine, the sun and the wine, the seabirds crying. All happiness must pay, and if our ship goes down, she'll go with the flag still flying.
But look at me and say, you will remember too, that this was our lovely day.
I'll remember when the time has come for happiness to pay. Sad and sighing, sad and dying, I'll remember how we loved.
We were married in August 1950, and we went on honeymoon to Newquay in Cornwall. Unfortunately, in those days, the last train to Cornwall was at 4:00 in the afternoon, so a colleague from work arranged to drive us down to Newquay. I just remember the honeymooners. It was the first time we went out on a boat, and it was the first time I was seasick, and it was a horrible, horrible feeling. Then in 1952, I left work because I was expecting Dennis, and he was born on January the 1st, 1953. The first day of the year of the coronation and the Stanley Matthews Cup final.
And where were you living then?
We were living in 2 rooms in Robertson Road, which was opposite my family. I spent a lot of time with my family but because it was Coronation and all the rest of it, we had a television. We had this 12-inch black and white television, and everybody would congregate in one of our 2 rooms to watch this little screen. We lived at the time with Uncle George and Auntie Bella, and Uncle George just adored Dennis and really took him over a lot of the time. But it was a happy time.
Now we're coming to your next track, which is Summertime in Heidelberg. Any particular reasons for choosing this track?
My favourite track from the Student Prince. We had a record player at my mother's, and used to play all these records. And this was my favourite track. But particularly because Mandy was born in June of 55, and Dennis came to the nursing home to choose his sister. And when we got home, we got out of the taxi and he went skipping through the passageway shouting, "We've got her, we've got her." And then it was jumped up on the chair by the side of the record player and played Summertime in Heidelberg because it was his mummy's favourite record.
When it's summertime in Heidelberg, there's beauty everywhere. All the trees are dressed in their Sunday best, and the brass band plays in the square.
Every day is like a holiday, strolling underneath the sun. All the Fräuleins wear flowers in their hair, with a smile to spare for everyone. The fragrant breeze, the linden trees, the promenade where lovers stray. But have a care, or someone there may steal your heart away. Strange things happen on a summer night when the bells begin to chime. It could happen to someone just like you down in Heidelberg in summertime.
Summertime in Heidelberg, sung by Mario Lanza and Anne Blythe, from the 1954 film The Student Prince. So there you were, living across the road in 2 rooms opposite the family home. How was life at that time?
Life was great. I enjoyed having my 2 children. I enjoyed living near to the family home. My mother and I spent most days together visiting other members of the family, like her brothers and sisters and their children. And it was lovely. I used to do the washing for both houses, mother's and mine. Used to go to the baths where they had a wash house and large washing machines. So I would do our washing and dry it there and bring it home ironed and ready. So that sort of, I just remember doing that whilst mother looked after the children. But then it became that 2 children in 2 rooms was a bit much. So we eventually were able to get a council house. And we moved into Ingleside Road. I forget now what it was called. It was not on an estate. It was a house that was taken over by the council during the war. So, because I refused to move to an estate, told by the councillor that I was putting myself above other people. And I suppose I was really, but my children were important. I didn't want them living on a miserable estate. We enjoyed having a house.
And so that brings us to your next track.
Yes, it's Que Sera, Sera. It was the first song that Mandy ever sang. And whatever will be, will be. And she was singing it all the time when she was so tiny. But she's lived her life to that as she deals with whatever life throws at her.
When I was just a little girl, I asked my mother, what will I be? Will I be pretty? Will I be rich? Here's what she said to me. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. When I grew up and fell in love, I asked my sweetheart what lies ahead. Will we have rainbows day after day? Here's what my sweetheart said. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. Now I have children of my own. They ask their mother, what will I be? Will I be handsome? Will I be rich? I tell them tenderly. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. Now I have children of my own. They ask their mother, what will I be? Will I be handsome? Will I be rich? I tell them tenderly. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. Que sera, sera.
Que Sera Sera, sung by Doris Day, music by Jay Livingstone, lyrics by Ray Evans. So now you find yourself in a house of your own.
Yes, it was lovely. We really enjoyed that. I took part-time work when the children started school, but the firm was only sort of round the corner from us, so if I couldn't get to work, they used to bring the work to me, which was lovely. After a few years, we moved to Cheltenham, or as my family say, we emigrated to Cheltenham. And we started life there, which was also very good. Mandy had her dancing. Dennis enjoyed the cricket, used to go every year to the cricket festival. And then in 1967, my sister Barbara died. She was just 2 weeks after her 35th birthday. It was terrible for us all. But this is what happens in families. And after that, it was discovered that Mandy had scoliosis and needed surgery. And the best place for her to go, we were advised, was Stanmore Hospital in Middlesex. So in 1969, Mandy went into hospital. She had her surgery and was there until April, when she came home and got stronger and was fine, and she's been fine ever since from her surgery. I started to work for an agency, so just did odd times, and they always had to fall in with the fact that I had to be home when my children came home from school, whatever.
So that brings us to your next track.
Yes, You'll Never Walk Alone. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but Brian and I took his mother for her first visit to London. I mean, I know she was well into her 60s at this time. And we saw all the sights in London, and she was absolutely amazed. And she said it was like looking at the Monopoly board. Then we took her to see Carousel in the evening, and she loved the whole day, the whole weekend of it. And she loved this tune, You'll Never Walk Alone.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky, and the sweet silver song of a lark. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on, with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone.
You'll Never Walk Alone from the 1956 Rodgers and Hammerstein film Carousel, sung by Clara May Turner. You just mentioned your mother-in-law. I understand you used to visit, or we used to visit, their house on quite a regular basis.
Yes, we did. We went definitely every Saturday afternoon for tea. The whole family would go there for tea on Saturdays, and we would all take our own tea, as it were.
Now, when you say the whole family, how many were there?
There were Beryl and Len with Patricia, and Pat and Ted, and Tom would be there, who was, well, Uncle Tom. He was Brian's best friend, but he was there always. And Hilda and David and mother-in-law. And we would, after we cleared the tea things and washed up, etc., we would sit and play cards, usually Patience with Hilda there, because she always wanted Chinese Patience. And then we used to have what we called the Bedford Street Choir. And we always sang You'll Never Walk Alone. And when it came to the phrase about do not be afraid of the dark, somebody would put the lights out and everybody would scream. It was really quite stupid, but we had fun and enjoyed it.
And that brings us to your next track.
Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I've chosen this because I used to be able to sing, and I could sing it, and I can't sing it anymore. So that's why I've chosen it.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I?
In a roundabout way, then, we now find ourselves, or you now find yourself, living in Cheltenham, Brian reaching retirement age, Mandy and Dennis having left home, both married, and Dennis with 3 children, your grandchildren, Tom, Sam, and Naomi.
We had a wonderful time with the grandchildren. Such wonderful memories. Used to take Sam and Tom to the park every Saturday afternoon when we visited, and imagined monkeys in trees and all sorts of animals, and we played poo sticks on the bridge. And coming home one day, Tom, who was about 5 years old at this time, 4 to 5, saying, "Oh, it opens a wonderful world of dreams." I just don't know where he got that from, but I just always remember him saying it. We just had great times. Sam was always the one that knew where to park and how to park and where we'd left the car, and he gave full directions of where to go. He knew everything about traffic and buses, everything. We just had a great time with our grandchildren. And then in 1999, Brian became ill, and he died in 2000. We all miss him terribly, but we can look back on the wonderful times that we all had together.
And that brings us to your final track,
which is Family Tree by the Dimples. And this was recorded as a special for Dennis's 60th birthday with his children. Tom playing bass guitar, Sam playing viola, and Naomi the flute, and Dennis on guitar, and Sam's partner Matt on drums.
When we were young, we used to sing, and we could feel the harmony. You'd sit there waiting in the wings. How long have you been waiting to let your light shine? Many years have gone since then. I've seen us go our different ways, but now we sit here once again. Tonight we're gonna sing out. Tonight our light will shine. This is the time and place to bring out our memories. It's written on every face. I can see it in you. You can see it in me. In all the years we had as part of a family tree, we knew the good and bad. I can see it in you. You can see it in me. I know it's left its mark on you. I see the same things in myself. You know there's nothing we can't do. We've been a long time waiting, but some things never die. It's time to leave all that behind. Time to lay that ghost to rest. We can't deny the ties that bind. Tonight we're gonna sing out. Tonight our light will shine. This is the time and place to bring out our memories. It's written on every face. I can see it in you. You can see it in me. In all the years we had, when we were young, we used to sing as part of a family tree. We could feel the harmony. We knew the good and bad. I can see it in you. You can see it in me.
Family Tree, written by Jerry Rafferty, and you've already been told who performed it. So now we're giving you the complete works of Shakespeare and the Bible, whether you want them or not, and you're allowed to take one other book.
The Sun is My Undoing by Marguerite Steen. When I was in my teens, my father suggested I read this book. My parents were always great readers, and Dad would sort of sort out what he considered were classics of their day for me to read. And I remember getting it from the library, and it was a huge book, so huge. It was about the slave trade in Bristol and also about Africa. I found it very heavy going, and I never did reach the end of the book. I gave up partway through. So I feel that I would really like to see it if I can't read it from start to finish.
And you're allowed just one luxury item.
That would be a photograph album of my family through my years, I suppose. Just sort of would help me with the memories that these tunes have helped me with, because they're all memories, and they're lovely memories.
Gwen Parrott, thank you very much for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to relive these memories.
Thank you.